We are arguably living in the most disruptive and dynamic point in history in at least 100 years. And because of that, we need to be rethinking how our cities function, because they are the epicenters of daily life. And this realization came over the course of the past few years as myself and James traveled across the country, meeting with clients. For me, it was speaking on my book tour for my first book, The Super Age, Decoding Our Demographic Destiny. But no matter where we went in the country, leaders were telling us that they didn't feel like they had the right measures in place for their cities to really understand if they were doing well or not. Time and time again, including last year at this event, civic leaders would come up to me or to James and say, we know the economy's good. We can see the cranes in the sky. We know the jobless rate. We know the commercial vacancy rate. We know the housing starts. We know all of this stuff, but something feels off. And it was, in fact, that conversation here last year with a member of the Travis County Commission that set this whole project in motion that we call the Geography of Prosperity Index. Everyone, I'm Brad Sherman. I am an author and a strategist. My focus historically has been in demographics, but this project has opened the aperture quite significantly in the work that I do. And today we are releasing the Geography of Prosperity Index, a 250 city measure across the largest metropolitan areas in the United States.
Hi everyone, I'm James Cloninger. I'm a recovering architect, now lead Motif, which is a location intelligence firm. We use spatial insights, demographics, these types of things to do site selection, decision support, lots of different things around who, where, and why. And like Brad said, we've had people across the country in 49 states and 4 territories that are working with local governments, and many of them asking these same questions. So when Brad brought this idea to me, I said, this is perfect, this is natural, this is something that we're going to use.
And we should note that this has never been done before. The data that we've used for this is drawing on public source data, so it all exists. The difference is that no organization, be it public or private, has pulled these different measures in one place.
Yeah, so the index is made up of, you'll see 5 different dimensions. Each of them have a number of indicators that come from open source, some that we've procured on our own. But they are a unique mix that's never been brought together before. And we're not going to get into the kind of the statistics or the science behind it, but the one thing I'll say up front is that these 5 are all balanced. So none of them get higher weighting than another. We thought that was an important feature of this index.
And we're going to start with the population renewal part of the index because that's my bread and butter. If you haven't read the news lately, the United States is going through a pretty significant population shift right now. Not only are our birth rates at historic lows, in fact, the lowest they've ever been, but we're also aging very quickly as a nation. And in certain parts of the country, they're actually depopulating. And this has never happened before quite like this. And in the past year, the president has been very successful at reversing US immigration policy. So that spigot of population growth that we became very accustomed to for so long is no longer flowing at the same rate. And because of that, our growth trajectory as a nation, which was really set to go well into the 2080s, 2090s, could stop as early as the 2030s now. So all of a sudden, people become an even more important part of the mix within cities and the nation, because all of a sudden we went from something that we had a surplus of to something now that we have a scarcity of.
So for automation readiness, who here is actually from Austin? Can I get a show of hands? I got some Austinites. Is that the right term, Austinites? All right. You guys are used to seeing robots on your streets, the Waymo taxis, that type of thing. But many cities and in urban areas across the country, this is still very unique. Actually, I live outside Washington, D.C. in Virginia, and we had a big snowstorm a few weeks ago. And it was the first time that I'd seen a robot right in front of my house in the middle of the snowstorm, getting stuck because it couldn't navigate the 2 feet of snow or however much there was there. This was a unique experience for me just a few weeks ago. And that kind of reflects how some cities have prepared themselves through innovation grants and through academics and through institutions and through organizations that are supporting technology, and it's not an even playing field.
Not even at all. So we think about the real big players in automation and artificial intelligence right now. We can basically hold up our two hands and pick out like 6 big cities. And Austin, of course, is one of them, along with Boston, the Silicon Valley, places like Pittsburgh. They're all doing well within this space right now. But those places unintentionally became like giant sucking tools for all of the talent. So in other parts of the country, they don't have the same talent level. They don't have the same investment level. They don't have the same educational systems in place to support this transition. So one of our goals was to really identify which cities had these types of educational institutions in place to help make the actual transition. A big part of that being in place, though, having that right knowledge city, that right knowledge system in place, is having strong social cohesion within your city. And this is really the glue that holds us together. And at a time of like hyper-partisan politics in the United States, cities that are able to hold themselves together right now and in the near future are going to be the ones that really excel. Because the cities that might be purple, might be blue, might be red, they are able to make better decisions because they have a shared framework for how to approach problem solving. They're not fighting against their neighbor. Their neighbor and these different political battles aren't the end of the world. They're simply disagreements. That's the way things used to be. And what we found consistently across the country is there are cities that really excel in this. And they are both in really blue states and really red ones.
And before you go on, I want to say one more thing about this one, because I think this is one of the most unique dimensions. You won't find this on other indices. And one of the indicators here was racial and generational integration. And that's a really hard thing to quantify. And I will talk about, this has taken us 6 months to put together.
At least.
We started talking about it last year. Obviously launching today, we're very excited about that. We're very proud of this. But this is one of those dimensions and some of the indicators that are so unique and were a real challenge to put together.
It's incredibly hard to do because every city's mix is different. And every city treats their mix differently. You have cities that have historical redlining, and some of that still exists today. You have cities that are very age segregated in some cases. So threading this needle was not easy. And what we can tell you about the index, let's be perfectly transparent here, kimonos open. There is no such thing as a perfect index. So we know you're gonna look at this today, some of you, and you're gonna look at it cross-eyed. I appreciate that. I would look at some of these scores cross-eyed too. But the way we've done this is very transparent, and we want to get feedback from it because we do plan on doing this for the foreseeable future, at least for the next 3 years, if not longer. Because this work, in addition to helping our clients understand the world better, this is actually the backbone of my new book, my forthcoming book, The Geography of Prosperity, A New Map of the American Dream, which comes out next year with MIT Press. So we have a significant vested interest in getting this right. And this social cohesion score, as was said, was one of the harder things to get to.
So I think everybody understands climate, whether or not we all agree on it. It is one of these indicators that I think you can talk eloquently about whether or not we call it climate change or we call it resilience or we call it something else. Insurance companies are absolutely using these indicators to factor in risk, and that has a real world, every month impact on families across the country.
Absolutely. And I was just in South Dakota a few weeks ago, which, as you know, is a deeply red state. About 2/3 or more of the population identifies with the Republican Party. And I was told the first time I went there to never mention the word climate change specifically. So I was talking about this index. They were the first audience to kind of get a tease of what the index was, how we were approaching it. And I framed it just like James did. And I said, listen, I don't care what your perspective is on climate change, and you shouldn't care what mine is either. What you should care about is that the insurance companies are pricing it in. They're pricing it into every single decision that is made now, and they're doing it, I would say, in a not so transparent way until you get your bill. And what we found is in the hardest hit parts of the country, this is coastal areas in particular, that's anywhere in South Florida, along the Gulf Coast, but also in the fire-prone areas out west, insurance premiums are going up 30 to 40% a year. So if you think the health insurance crisis is bad, imagine layering on this insurance crisis when it comes to property. And you may think to yourself, well, I'm flush. I've got cash. I can withstand this. Can your neighbor? That's the big question. And I think in South Florida, we're starting to see this play out in real time because people are starting to default on their homes that are in these condo buildings, many of them who are on fixed income. The cascading effect from this can be quite dramatic and, quite frankly, quite dystopian, because the only people that kind of get out of this relatively scot-free are the rich and the mobile. Those are the only two groups. So in these coastal areas, it's predicted that there will be a migration from them. In fact, we're already starting to see that pattern. That's what I was here last year talking about, was this emerging pattern of climate migration. And time again, the people who are left behind are the people that aren't paying into the tax rolls. So all of a sudden you have a population that's in need and no way to pay for them. So it puts these cities at greater levels of risk. The cities that are further away from the climate risk zones, or maybe we should be calling it insurance risk zones at this point, they're further north. The areas that hug the Great Lakes, one of the best performing areas in our study, is the Massachusetts-Connecticut corridor. They're cooler, more access to ample fresh water, and less likely to catch on fire. Regardless, no matter what you call it, this is one of the most important measures that people keep dancing around because we're afraid of words.
And I know on this one, we include indices from FEMA with some from extreme heat days and access to water. I do want to say a little bit about our background. So I grew up in Western Colorado. Water is everything. Outside a little town called Rifle. If anyone knows where Rifle is, raise your hand. Wow, what?
Wow.
More people know about Rifle than live in Austin in this crowd? That's amazing.
It's got a unique name.
It does have a unique name. It had. Well, in where I grew up, we say all buckle but no cattle about certain people. So anyway, I grew up in Western Colorado, moved to Northern California for college, lived in Michigan, taught at the University of Hawaii, lived overseas for 15 years, and then now I live in Virginia. So that's kind of my footprint. I know, thinking about this might be like, where you guys come from? But I wanted to say, I still have an app on my phone right now. I forgot what it's called right now, but tracks wildfires because my parents still live in Rifle. And every summer, they evacuate a couple times. So it's very real regardless where you live.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you can't find it everywhere. And the question is how long until the insurance catches up? I had a number of people reach out on TikTok. By the way, shout out to TikTok. Great place to connect on subjects like this. Alerting me to Iowa having an insurance crisis now because of a number of derechos they've had in the past year. And these people keep saying, we didn't even know what a derecho was. And all of a sudden it's being priced into our insurance. So it is coming for us even in places that we wouldn't expect. The last one is governance and foresight. And, this is how your government is behaving. Are they working in your best interests? Are they transparent about the policymaking process? One of the things that we tried very hard to get to, we struggled, was not only is there a plan for your city, but does the plan have KPIs? And my God, the number of cities that don't have KPIs attached to their plans. They're just kind of this listful document that says, we'd love to do these things. But that's not how things work at the end of the day. The other thing that we've really found that I think is wildly interesting, and we'll get into this a bit more, hopefully in the Q&A, is the cities that perform incredibly well in governance, they tend to be medium-sized and smaller-sized cities. The big ones across the board really struggle with this. And I was sitting in a cafe 10 days ago with Mayor Mueller from South Bend and a business owner who moved there from, of all places, New York City. And I said, what do you love about this place? And he goes, in South Bend, your government can't hide from you. It's 100,000 people or so, it's a small town. We know our city councilman because he comes in here and eats. We know the mayor because we can walk up to him on the street and say hello and express our concerns. The bigger the city gets, the more distance that comes between the individual and the institution. Also, these smaller cities are a bit more agile, which is really fascinating. So South Bend just opened, I think it was 6 months ago now, a consolidated city service center, everything under one roof. How many of you live in big cities? How many of you have had to go to multiple buildings in multiple parts of town to get something done? Most of us have. It's a miserable experience. Can you imagine going to one spot where they'll do everything for you? South Bend's an interesting example of this because they're getting rewarded from it, not only with people moving to South Bend and making it their home, but philanthropies like Bloomberg are giving them money to do really interesting and innovative things. One of the things they're doing is integrating AI into their call center, which I think is amazing. And the AI actually predicts the people who have the most need. So the city can reach out to them before they fall into crisis. Now, if that isn't good government, I don't know what is.
Bradley, before you go on, go back. Now that we've told you what the 5 indicators are, I want you, think about what cities might be in the top 10, just on your own. Just, think about it. Because this is something that we did before we started this.
Did.
And we were thinking about what cities we thought would score well. Now we're going to go to the number 1 scoring city next.
Which
and it is not what we expected.
Blew us away, in fact. We debated whether or not we had gotten the data wrong because of it.
A lot.
Because we live in DC, I live in DC Metro. New York does not feel like a place that works. But it does, specifically in one measure, and that is social cohesion.
Yeah, New York City is so out there ahead of most of the other MSAs and cities in social cohesion. It probably because of that one score, that one dimension, it got it up to the number 1 spot.
It pulled it up. But because we designed it with 5 different dimensions, no single dimension was supposed to dominate. So we can't just blame it on that alone. New York also does pretty well on population renewal. Now, this is the New York metropolitan area that we're talking about here. They've had over 200 years of history of people moving there. So there's always been a steady flow of people coming to New York City. The question for a city like New York is because it is an entry point and either a temporary or permanent home for immigrants, if you're turning off the spigot of immigration and you've got a low birth rate in New York, what does that mean for the city's long-term success? So again, this is a diagnostic tool. It's not something to prescribe with, but basically we can say to in New York, if this happens, we have to look at these other areas a bit better. The other thing that we found with New York City, which I think is really telling again with big cities, New York really did poorly on governance and foresight. Really did poorly on governance and foresight. Part of it is the sheer size. Part of it is the multi-jurisdictional region. Transparency was a big part of it. But they fell in the lower half of all cities at 134 out of 250. So it's doing well at the top, but there are places that it can improve significantly. And that's one of the big takeaways we hope you bring with you today, is that every city can improve here. Every city has the power to get better. And in fact, if cities make minor tweaks, they can really see outsized results at the end of the day. The other thing before we move on is a note about population. And I think this is very important, especially if you're a business leader right now. About 10% of the population is in fully remote work, okay? That's millions of people. These people are actively choosing where to live now. They don't have to live in New York to work in finance necessarily. They don't have to live in the Midwest to do manufacturing or work within that industry. They are mobile people. And because of that, we can now compete for that kind of talent versus going for the big employers. One of the inspirations for the project we can talk about briefly was the Amazon HQ2 selection process. How many of you remember that mess?
I was actually part of a bid team for the city of Milwaukee, sitting in the DC metro area in a building in a neighborhood called Crystal City, thinking, how is Amazon going to make this decision? And I did my own ranking of where I thought it would be. And Northern Virginia never showed up in that ranking, my own ranking. And after it came out, I had 2 months, and the landlord of my building paid us out so they could turn the building over to Amazon. So I was sitting in the building that was going to become one of the headquarters buildings, and I couldn't even figure it out.
It's still baffling to us because all of the promises that were made, as these big companies do when they're talking about relocation, to get the tax increment financing, to get all the deferments, all the road easeway, all that stuff that they ask our local governments to pay for, not our local governments, they ask us to pay for, is really expensive, and it almost never pays out the way it's promised. But you know what does pay out as promised? People. People pay out as promised. In fact, one of my first stops on the reporting tour for my book was stopping off in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa, Oklahoma has a really innovative project called Tulsa Remote. This started in 2018, before COVID. They pay you $10,000 to move to Tulsa. People like the $10,000. Nobody's going to shy away from it. But they take the $10,000 and move there because Tulsa is offering them affordable quality of life, a community that's very tight-knit, and a sense of belonging. 8 years after this project took off, Tulsa can comfortably report, that 80% of people stay after the first year, 50% of people stay after the 5th year, and for every dollar they spend on the program, they get $4.31 in return. Now that is an ROI. But when you see this population change happening and you see this remote work and automation coming into focus and this ability for us to get around the country easier, and there are certainly places that are cheaper than New York City, all of a sudden you realize that people become the single greatest asset. And you've got to figure out structures and policies to recruit them to where you want your city to stay.
Okay, so where do you think number 2? Any guesses?
We'll get there. all good choices.
Good guesses.
Durham. I see a yes. Durham? Okay.
Nice.
The mayor was very excited when he found out this morning because this one also shocked us.
We knew there was going to be a medium-sized city, probably in North Carolina. We didn't know which one. And full disclosure, Raleigh did very well as well.
Yeah, Raleigh rounded out the top 10 at, I believe, number 8 is where they landed. What this starts to illustrate, though, is long-term thinking versus short-term thinking, which is very rare in America these days. 60 years ago, when the furniture industry basically collapsed on itself, they started investing in technology. So this is a 60-year bet that's now paying off in Raleigh-Durham so well that they make the top of this list, and they're very well prepared for the future as a result. Like I say, with any region, though, there are risks. There are always risks. And the single greatest risk to North Carolina right now, People are moving there in
Growth.
droves.
Yeah.
We know consistently that when people move anywhere in droves, hello Austin, hello Nashville, we know when this happens, social cohesion starts to fray because you have a whole new culture of people moving in. It doesn't mean it's going to be bad long term, but there might be a little pain in the short term. It might take away the culture that made a place like Austin weird. It might take away the culture that made Nashville country music capital of the world. These places don't feel like they did even just 10 years ago. And we all know it. We all know it if we've traveled to them. But it is an interesting takeaway that's something to watch.
And Durham has the highest performing average scores of all cities.
It's very well balanced across the board. So because of that, we're more confident that they're built better than a place like a New York City, even though they're number 2.
Who said Ann Arbor?
Great guess. Go Blue.
Actually, 6 years ago, my company did a version of this for ourselves. So we thought we're going to have to move out of Crystal City, Virginia, because we just got kicked out by HQ2. Where should we move? And when we did that study, not with these same indicators, but some of the similar ones, our number 1 city was Madison. Somebody else said Madison. So going into this, I thought Madison was going to be number 1, 2, or 3. What we knew a kind of quasi-college town, maybe in the upper Midwest, was going to do well. We didn't know Ann Arbor.
We should have placed bets.
We should have.
We would have all lost.
Yeah.
What makes Ann Arbor unique, as well as a handful of university communities across the country, is they made a leap in the past decade, roughly the past decade, from being what is known as a town and gown city to an integrated city. And I believe certainly in my reporting for the book, but we've had these long conversations with our 2 organizations, is that this was a strategic move by the university more so than the city. Because these small towns, smaller cities, were not necessarily very attractive places to go. They weren't bad, but if you're trying to
go for business owners to go and
Correct.
Invest and grow their businesses.
Business owners, but also for your leading thinkers of the world, if you have the option of going to a Boston or an Ann Arbor 20 years ago, what are you picking? What are you picking? I mean, come on. I mean, that's not even I don't think it's even a question. The same holds true in a city like South Bend. Again, going back to that example because it's the most recent one. I was there 30 years ago when I looked at colleges. My grandma was an Irish Catholic and she was hell-bent on me attending Notre Dame. I got to South Bend and I said, hell no. Hell no. Hell no. It was terrible. It's lovely today. The university has made a concerted effort over really just the past 5 to 10 years now of making key investments in the city. Those key investments includes things like a hydropower plant that basically powers the entire university campus, or about 90% of it. And in return, they built a park over it for the city. Notre Dame purchased the old Times building, their old newspaper building downtown, and it's currently being converted into an innovation center. Now it is no longer town and gown, 2 islands sharing the same space. It is an integrated community, and it feels like it.
So next we have not a top 3, but this is probably the
most
biggest,
surprising one.
The biggest surprise. This is our equivalent of me sitting in Crystal City wondering where HQ2 would be. This is in our backyard.
And really did well on both climate resilience and automation. A lot of smart people have moved to Frederick, Maryland from DC because of affordability. We think that's part of it. The state of Maryland on the whole does fairly well, even though they've got some significant pressures on them right now, specifically as it relates to population. But Frederick, I mean, we're still kind of gobsmacked by it. Overall, though, one of the better performing cities for governance in the country. But it comes back to that same theme over again. Small and medium-sized cities seem to be winning the day when it comes to running their governments well. We still haven't found what that secret sauce is yet. It's one of my goals is to figure out what that secret sauce is.
And if anybody has other examples, it sounds like you guys were right on with some of the guesses.
Yeah, holler out.
Holler
or
them
follow
out.
up with us afterwards.
Please. So I said I used to live in Northern California. I did go to UC Berkeley, which falls into this MSA. And I know San Francisco specifically, the city of San Francisco has gotten terrible press for probably the last 10 years. So again, we were really surprised to see this on here. But I think part of this, and it goes to kind of explaining the metropolitan statistical area, this includes Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville, Fremont, like the whole North Bay. It doesn't include South Bay, San Jose, but again, very surprised. And we included it because we wanted to have an example from the top 10 in the West. And this is the only top 10 city in the West.
Seattle.
Oh, in Seattle, that's
Yeah,
right.
Seattle also makes the top 10. But this is one of the things that really held us back in the research is the way MSAs are designed. In the perfect world, with the right amount of funding, this was a self-funded project, by the way, we could get better city data, specifically from the city. And we had a real tension with the amazing team of data scientists and cartographers trying to get the balance right on this. We feel like we've got it to the best place we could have. But if I could have really picked apart San Francisco proper, I would have loved to have done that. The other thing that we don't do in this research, and I really have to hit this home, because every time I talk about it, somebody says, well, what about the cost of housing? We don't cover the economic side of it. There are plenty of measures that exist in the world that talk about the economics of the city. We are not going to add to that conversation. This is another diagnostic tool for city leaders to take a look at, for individual citizens to take a look at, for business leaders to understand as they're making decisions like site selection. Do we stay? Do we go? Can we hire more people here or not? That's the tool that this is. That's what makes it different. It's not an economic one.
Before you go on,
Yep.
now we're going to go to the lowest ranking city. Remember, we're doing 250.
Yes, but let's make it a little bit easier.
Okay, let's make it easier.
Can we?
Yes, please.
Which state is it in? No. I love Oklahoma. We'll see. I love Oklahoma.
Arizona, it's not Arizona.
Who said it? Florida? It's in Florida. It's the Villages.
Come on, you could have guessed this.
So does everyone know what the Villages are? It is basically an entire city built for retirement. So their population renewal score
Look at the population.
is in the toilet.
2.2.
So where New York City got a little bump from social cohesion, they got a big knock for population renewal because the people that are moving there are retirees. So they're of a certain age, almost exclusively. They're kind of in the same income group for the most part. The big threat with not having population is it's an easily disruptible place when it comes to service delivery. And a lot of these folks, obviously, will need some degree of care or some degree of service delivered to them. If you don't have the population there to do those jobs, what happens to those folks? They did surprisingly well on climate. Like that kind of surprised us overall, but it is a little bit more inland, and inland Florida tends to do okay at the end of the day. But the social cohesion score, because we have that intergenerational mix there, is really soft. Now, I had sent an advance report to my friend Brian, who actually is my age. In fact, he's 3 years younger than me. I'm 48, by the way. And he lives in the Villages. I know it's crazy, right? So Brian's actually a UX designer, and he specializes in older adults and designing for older adults. He thought, what better place in the world can I do that than here? So Brian wrote this really thoughtful piece for his Substack this morning on our take on the research and how, even though the research was telling us that it was the worst performing, the city actually functions. So again, you have to take these real world examples in addition to the other data that you have. Now, I've been on the road for the past, what are we at now? 7 months, 8 months? I'm exhausted, But I've seen America, and I've got to meet some amazing people, many mayors, governors, civic leaders, and we're starting to really tie up a closely knit thesis here now about what is telling about the research, like past the research. 5 quick small points. The first is that growth is not always good. Civic leaders, for some reason, so many of them are fixated on growth that they can't see that the other parts of the index, the other parts of what make their place so special, can fall apart because it's all about the money. It's all about the money. You can erode history, you can erode culture, you can erode your basic buffers on climate. Take a look at a place like Charleston, South Carolina, that has been paving its wetlands, or Houston, Texas, which has been doing the same thing. Light storms in Houston now cause incredible flooding. These are bad decisions because they were decisions only made through the lens of growth. That's it, full stop. The second is long-term thinking almost always beats out short-term thinking, especially in this period that we're in, as we're encountering multiple disruptions at the same time. Population, weather, technology. That old adage of the tortoise wins the race, that certainly plays out here. So longer term thinking is something that I think is really an important thing to take away.
Let me jump in on that one, because I think we do a lot of site selection for companies that are looking for where to open a new store or a new drugstore, that type of thing, using a lot of spatial tools. But and part of the reason we built this is most of the indicators that they're using for those decisions are economic indicators, and they're very short-term oriented. And we needed this tool to be able to go back to business leaders and say, okay, beyond just these economic indicators, which are valid, let's look at something else. So I think that long-term, short-term thing is a really big deal.
Yeah, and also the economic measures are lagging. I think that's something we haven't really fully spoken about yet. They're lagging indicators. And as the gentleman from the police force came in, it's like crime. It's a lagging indicator. You know what the crime was, not what the crime will be. So as we're looking at different cities across the country, obviously what we want to know if they have a fully funded police force, but their crime rate is not as important to us, and it's not included in our measures at all. That's already reported somewhere else. But the cities that are starting to do things around early crime prevention are starting to see some really tangible results. Baltimore is one that sticks out in my mind. The other one is Philadelphia, which has used greening, canopy, and murals, artwork in these different communities that have actually lowered the crime rate. They believe directly lowered the crime rate within the communities and built that social cohesion score up. The fourth, civic strategy should always be people first. It should never be corporate first. If the people are happy, and it'll work. That's putting a lot of trust in the system, but over and over again, when these cities have invested in their people, number one, Pete Buttigieg making basic, simple decisions in 2012 to remove one-way roads out of the city of South Bend because it was only designed to get people in and out of the city. To the suburbs, when people were actually living in the city, he reversed that. It was a simple thing to do, but all of a sudden people who were living in the city felt like they were part of it. The fourth one, or the fifth one rather, I think this is probably the most important one, is that sprawl creates strains on our social cohesion.
The 15-minute city.
Suburbs are bad.
Yeah.
I can say that fairly equivocally now. And I was sitting with the mayor of Sioux Falls just last week. By the way, one of the more amazing men I've ever met in politics. One of the more impressive men that I've ever met, period. He's a servant leader, true and true, and he's leaving office after 8 years, no more political ambition. He wanted to get in, do the job, and get out. Wow.
Never heard about it.
Meanwhile, Clyburn's running at 82 for the House again in South Carolina. The point with this is that we talked about the fraying of social cohesion, and one of the things he said to me was, one of my greatest achievements here in Sioux Falls is that I haven't let this tinderbox catch on fire. I have really, really focused on it. And I said, well, I think one of the challenges to social cohesion, and he pointed to his cell phone as he was saying this. And I said, well, I think one of the big challenges really was suburbanization first. And we've just kept layering on and layering on. Coming back to a city like Austin with tech tech is also a problem for social cohesion, not in the ways that you think. One of tech's number one goals is to remove friction from our lives. Like, that's a stated goal, right? We've all heard this before. Friction actually turns out to be really good for social cohesion. How many of you know the name of your postal worker? One. When's the last time you were checked out by a person in the grocery store? One. All of those different friction points helped create tighter communities. Tech has erased those. The last time I was in a grocery store was probably 3 months ago. I'm still getting groceries at home, but they're coming from Instacart and they're arriving on my doorstep and I don't even see the person who does it. Those things add up and actually erode social cohesion. When you layer that on to communities that don't have people living so tightly with each other, communities that don't have sidewalks where people can see each other and create those weak ties that build to stronger ties, that is where a big part of the problem is. I'm not anti-car. Cars are great if you can afford one these days. But cars and suburbanization are an issue. And that's why we're starting to see two things happen. One, we're starting to see communities redesign around new urbanism and building up kind of these new developments that look and feel like cities. And the second thing is, there is now a realization amongst developers, it took a while for this, they finally caught on. People want to live in tight communities for the most part. They'll sacrifice square footage to live closer to people. Part of it, I believe, aside from the research, and I'd love to talk with people about this if they're interested, is that we trained late Gen Xers, millennials, and now Gen Zs to live in small spaces in the city. And now they don't want big spaces, even though they have to move to the suburbs largely for schools, because that's where the bigger homes are that can accommodate their families. So we want to give you a quick guide to using the index.
Yeah, I'm not going to take too much time on this because I think there's a lot of ways. I mean, if you're a person that wants to move, potentially maybe you're retiring. I've heard that from a lot of people. Oh, I'm retiring. I want to move to a place where I'm not going to have to move again. I want to go somewhere that has, resilience. If you're a business leader, if you're a business decision maker thinking about site selection or moving your office or placing remote workers, the tool is great for that. If you're a planner or city official and you want to look at your scores versus others and just look at maybe which scores you could focus on to bump it up, we're going to do this every year, people. So we hope to be back reporting on the future and a new index next year.
Yeah, and if you have a peer city that you compete with, like Fargo and Sioux Falls, this is a great way to pit them against each other.
Before we go on, I think everyone wants to see one city.
Yeah.
Which city was it again?
Austin.
All right. Number 30. So not as high, maybe as some people would have thought, but it's the highest ranking in Texas. It's also the second highest south of the 35th parallel. Only city higher in the south is Atlanta. And there's really only 3 cities south of the 35th parallel that are in the top 50. That's Austin, Atlanta, and Tallahassee. So all things said, pretty good scores here.
Yeah, really good scores. But like all things, it's not fixed. This could change by the next year. It could change the next 5 years. We certainly think it'll change within the next 5 to 10. That's the horizon when this stuff starts showing up in the data, good decisions versus bad decisions. So on that, we would love to take your questions. We've got 10 minutes or so, I believe, 15 minutes to take your questions. But if you want to get in touch with us, geographyofprosperity.com is live.
Went live this morning.
It works on mobile. You can look up your city.
It's beautiful.
Please do. It's gorgeous. You can look up your city. You can compare it with other cities in the country. You can look at comparables. It's all there. Our methodology is there. Let us know if you like it or you hate it. You won't hate it. You won't hate it. Best way to get me is on Instagram. You can find my email there, my websites. Every day I do social videos, which you can take a look at and see my face. And of course, James, you can get at his email at Motive.
And you won't see my face there.
I think that's their loss. So questions, if you have them, come up to the mic, please, just so we can keep it for recording.
Thank you for the talk. My thoughts kept going back. I'm not sure if you're aware of the book, The Geography of New Jobs. Mm-hmm. And I almost wonder if you see that as a counter thesis to this. Because one of the points of that book was it's kind of a winner take all. If we think about prosperity and AI being the key to prosperity or things around that nature, what I would read from that book is that there's going to be a few winners where all the the thesis is the super clusters, and all these other cities, they can do great in other ways, but the talent attracts the talent, and so the winners will just the rich gets richer. So New York, San Francisco, Seattle will all capture the AI economy, and everyone else will be left behind. If you believe that thesis of the book.
I don't.
Okay.
We don't.
We don't. Yes, I'm sorry. We do not. There's some big holes in that thesis.
Okay.
The first is assuming that things won't change with tech.
Good point.
So I always like to say, when's the last time you ever thought about a lamplighter or somebody who does horseshoes or saddlery? You don't, right? Do you know anyone who does those jobs? Whenever there's a major leap in technology, there is a pain period and then there is a pleasure period. We are in the pain period right now. And it's just at the very tip of it. And in the short term, I think that thesis is spot on. I think the big cities are going to continue to suck up every last drop of talent. My hometown of Pittsburgh, which does very well, cannot get VC funding from outside of Pittsburgh to show up there, despite having a deep bench of talent and the leading robotics university in the world. CMU. They cannot get that VC money into Pittsburgh. So in the short term, there will be pain. In the short term, these big cities will continue to suck up on this talent. There's an economics piece I think that's missing too, okay? These big cities have become ridiculously expensive. And even people who are in tech are struggling to buy homes. People on $200,000 a year salary are needing help with financing now to buy a property. That is bonkers. Meanwhile, in a city like South Bend, I met a young guy who had graduated from Notre Dame, decided to stay in South Bend. He's 30 years old. He is already married. He already has one child. He works for the city in a government job, and he owns his own home. The American dream hasn't changed. People still want that kind of life. They want to be able to live that kind of life. The cities don't offer it the way they used to. The promise of moving to a big city isn't what it was 25 years ago. I think there's going to be a reactionary force against it. And you will see industry dissipate again. Because you could have made this argument in 1900. Oh, well, New York's got out, the industry is going to stay there. It didn't, though. It dissipated across the country. I think AI is actually going to do more to create individual millionaires than not. But people have to have the right skill sets. They have to be super creative. They have to have great communication skills. And above all, they have to be curious. And there are cities in this country that are building that kind of intellect within their communities in novel ways. The entire Chattanooga library system is doing this. Memphis is doing this. Not a place where you'd expect them to be leaning into this transformation, but they are, because they've seen bad transformations happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Quick question about cars and demographics a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of anecdotal on my end, but what I've been observing is a lot of Gen Alpha not driving.
Yeah.
I teach at a community college, and it's been really frustrating because it was built for this suburban mindset of everybody borrows mom and dad's car, they drive to take classes, they go home, and more of our students don't drive.
Correct.
And I'm curious to see how that's going to impact cities, again, going forward, that as fewer and fewer people are driving, that density becomes more and more critical.
Let me add to that. We do some projects for the Department of War, I guess now, Department of Defense, for military planning on bases. And a project we did last year, we were looking at where junior enlisted, those are the people living in the barracks, would go to eat. And they said, well, they're going to Burger King, they're going to blah, blah, blah. Those places are too far to go without a car. And they said, what do you mean? They don't have cars? So it's true also in the military, which is kind of surprising, I think.
This is a little outside of the index, but it is core to the work that I do around demographics, is that with young people today, they are on a delayed maturation process. we used to have a very kind of linear, prescribed tick box of things that we did in the life course. That started breaking down after the boomers. Gen X, at least the front end, kept it, but it really started to fall apart in kind of middle Gen X and younger. So where does this show up? It shows up in everything, including purchasing, like cars. Everything is delayed. They're buying cars later if they're buying them at all. They're having sex later if they're having it at all. They're getting married later if they get married at all. Like all of these things kind of add up.
Kids.
Kids too, if they have them at all. The one part that I think really underscores the problem with the dream right now, the American dream right now, is affordability. That is the number one thing I think that has really thrown us off. In 1986, 40 years ago, you could comfortably buy a home in this country by 29 years old. You know what it is today? 40. Boom. It's 40. It's the highest it has ever been. So of course, everything is delayed as a result. Now, you can look at a couple different things for this. You know, obviously changes in society have happened, but there are also policy changes that have happened that have kind of pushed this along too. I look at the Affordable Care Act as one of those things that was unintentional in its design, but made kids' dependence longer. Kids can stay on their parents' insurance now until 26. They're kids now until 26. They're kids in the eyes of the law until 26 now. Those things have cascading impacts on society. That's just the way it works. Fully unintended consequence, fully unintended. But here we are.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi.
Hi, thanks so much for this. It was really interesting. I work for AARP's Public Policy Institute, and we produce the Livability Index. So I'm really excited to see.
I'm an AARP alum.
Beautiful. My question is about data. One, will you guys be looking at data going backwards? Is there any way to project this backwards to see trends over time? And my second question related to data is, are you at all concerned about the state of national data sets? I'm not sure exactly what data you use, but I know you mentioned FEMA data.
Yeah.
I work a lot with national data sets, and that's been top of mind. So I was just curious what.
Yeah, I can talk about that. I mean, we use Bureau of Labor and Statistics, FEMA, CDC, Census in this index, and in other projects, many more. I think we're very familiar with about 20 different data sets that are at risk from the federal government right now. So absolutely. On the going backwards, we have not talked about that. We definitely are talking about, in the future years. And honestly, some of the indicators were challenging enough, I would say, to get a representative sample across 250 cities. I think going backwards would be, if there were a good use case to do it, we'd love to do it, but I don't think.
Yeah, and we can anything can be done with the right funding. Sure. And that's the way we always talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody wants to write a big check and ask us to do it, we can do it. I mean, it can be done. Mm-hmm. As for the data sets, the FEMA one is my personal biggest concern because the flood maps are out of date based on the storms that we're having. I will say that in the case of the flood maps, a private organization like First Street has done a really good job of kind of filling in the gaps. In fact, if anyone hasn't looked at First Street data around climate, you should. It's amazing. First Street data has now embedded the flood scores into Zillow now. So if you're interested in your own home and its flood score and its heat score, just type it into Zillow and you can find that out. But that's a siloed measure again. And this is what we wanted to get away from, is people thinking in silos. Because every time we talk with corporates, they're saying, oh, well, we're thinking about the climate lens, or we're thinking about the people lens, or they're only thinking through these silos. Getting people to think a bit more holistically gives them a better perspective, even if the data is not perfect. At least they're getting a more balanced viewpoint on it. But we know plenty of people who do data collection in the government. Is it fully at risk? I mean, I think if you take a look at this, the report on the economy this week, it's not at risk yet, because those are bad numbers. Those are really bad numbers. So I still have very high confidence in the government to do its job.
Thank you.
I should also note, because it's a very good question about kind of doing this again, either forwards or backwards, We've already been approached to do this for other countries, and it's something that we're very keen on doing. It really comes down to funding again. This is not an ask for cash, it's just a capital question that we have swirling in our minds because these types of data exist other places almost in parallel. We can do it for any Commonwealth country, that's basically any country that was under the British Crown, with maybe the exception of India, because we can do it for Korea, we can do it for Japan, we can do it for Canada, we think Mexico, because their data's gotten very good there, maybe Argentina. That's basically it though. But it can be done, and in fact, MIT wants us to do it. They haven't written a check yet though. Yeah.
So thank you so much for this talk. It's very interesting. I am a Safe Streets advocate in Jersey City.
Nice.
And one of the things I'm curious about is what's the relationship between the percent of people that use public transportation daily or for their main form of transportation and social cohesion?
High.
My personal hypothesis is very high.
Incredibly high. And I will tell you where you can actually see this play out in real time right now. Take a look at Oklahoma City. You're from Oklahoma. Look up Ward 2, look up James Cloninger. Oklahoma City is a very unique city in the country. Tulsa is as well, because they are basically purple cities in a very red state. They have this almost combative relationship between the city governments and the state governments. But about 10 years or so, they instituted a new financing model for local governments to do capital projects. It's called MAPS, Metropolitan Area Projects, okay? It's a penny tax or a half penny tax on sales. And that's how they raise money to do these special projects, okay? Stay with me for just a second here. Everyone needed the background. The MAPS projects, when they were originally done, what do you think the first thing the leaders did? They built stadiums. They built those freaking stadiums. Well, public doesn't love that because stadiums don't have the greatest return on investment. They're seeing billionaire owners. It didn't really play out well politically. So now Oklahoma City has gotten to a point where it's calibrated really to what people need. They bring people into the design process early. They are setting really clear, measurable goals, KPIs, and people can see the results pretty fast. James Cooper, personal friend of mine, city councilman, Ward 2, built sidewalks and made sure that there was greater connectivity on the bus system, which is actually quite robust for Oklahoma City considering how spread out it is. Mm-hmm. And commitments to the tramway, the trolley that they have in the city, even though that's has less efficacy. But overall, yes. And I visited James and I visited Oklahoma City, and he took me to the sidewalks that his community used to have. The last one was built in 1945. Then he showed me the part of his neighborhood, his district, where the new sidewalks have been. They're ADA compliant now because there was no ADA back in 1945. People are out, people are walking. People can get to their bus stops now that they couldn't get there before. It is huge for social cohesion. And then you take a look at a city like Washington, D.C. or New York, bolsters the argument even more about the use of public transportation. It also questions how cities respond to certain things. You probably heard that D.C. had a really terrible snowstorm. Most of the East Coast had it. They called it snowcrete because
we got 2 feet.
You got it too. So the snowcrete was so bad in D.C., but what did the mayor do? What was the first thing she did? She cleared the streets. There was no support to clear the sidewalks. In fact, the first thing they said was, we're suspending sidewalk cleaning for the businesses in the community and the residents. You don't get a fine because we know it's so hard to clear the snow. 40% of the people who live in my district, I live 15-minute walk from the White House, do not own a car. Everything we do is by foot. It was miserable for 2 weeks. So it also highlights, now you have a common kind of enemy, the fact that and everyone's commiserating about it, you know? So yes, they're good for social ties. I think one of the best things about it is that it lets you see people that you wouldn't see otherwise. Hard to measure, doesn't feel too sticky, but that empathy comes right into decision-making as a result. I actively take public transportation, not because I need to, because I want to.
Yeah. Same. Thank you so much.
This will be I think our last one, and we can take questions out, because are you kicking us out at 3:30? Okay, we'll take questions then.
Social
He says time.
cohesion, cohesion and dog parks. Amazing. No, anyway.
It is good for, I mean, I think people like them in the neighborhood. You know they're
Yeah.
contentious.
Yeah, I guess so. All right. Anyway, but my question is, you did just lightly touch on my demographic, which would be retiring and trying to figure out where to live, and you won't have to leave in 20 years' time because you picked the wrong climate place with the wrong city. Social cohesion. So, where are you suggesting? Do I look up your site and start following
look.
that? And
Take a look at the
will
site.
that help me determine where I'd want to move?
It is a tool for you to use.
Yeah, it's a tool, but you didn't really name the cities, and I know you guys could probably name like top five.
There are Ann Arbor is a perfect case.
Yeah.
Where you have a tight, compact town, good governance, great hospital system. You know, there's the university there.
Over
There-
Madison.
There are certain university communities now that are really leaning into older adults living within the community. In fact, Arizona State has an entire retirement community on campus now.
Yeah, but
Part of the
Arizona's
reason
not gonna
is
do
because
well.
we are literally at a cliff now when it comes to enrollment for universities because there have been so few kids being born. So if these universities want to stay in business, they have to find new markets. And some of them are leaning into older adults. There's plenty of them that are out there that exist. I think you think about the absolute worst case scenario of what you need when you're older. And what do you need when you're older? The worst case scenario, care. That is the worst case scenario. Or the inability to get yourself from point A to point B, so public transportation.
Yeah,
That's where I would focus my search.
public transportation.
Florida is not where I would focus my search.
No, Phoenix isn't. No.
I wanted to move to Miami for years, like as a second home.
Yeah, no.
We will not do it. The insurance piece is way too much risk.
Right. Okay.
We'll take a last one. I know people have to leave, but if you want to stay, we'll talk to you afterwards outside. Hi.
I'm the mayor of Cedar Park, Texas, one of the
Oh,
major
me
suburbs
too.
of Boston. And I want to thank you for this. It's very validating for our understanding of our challenges as well as all the things we're doing. Curious how difficult it would be for us to either on our own or working with you to like back into our city specific ranking out of the MSA.
Absolutely.
It's doable.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I would reach out to James.
Yeah.
To point on that because you have his email and get to him first. But yes,
I'll give you all my card,
Yeah,
too.
we already are working with some other cities, not quite doing exactly this because it's been launched just today, but very similar things with cities across the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the business case for this, Harvard Business Review ran a piece on this index this morning, which is great to read, and it's on their site and it's free, the first article, if you want to pick it up. So thank you very much. Great having you here today.